Welcome to Tabernacle Talks, the podcast where we gather to explore the heart and soul of Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle. I'm your host, Pastor Gary Boyd, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for these insightful conversations. Each episode, Tabernacle Talks delves into stories, teachings, and experiences that shape our faith community. We bring you interviews and discussions with our fellow church members, leaders, and special guests who share a deep connection with the Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle. From the comfort of your homes, cars, or wherever you're listening, we invite you to embark on a journey of faith, discovery, and community. Together, we'll explore a wide range of topics that are of significance to our church family. We'll delve into Scripture, seeking wisdom and insight for our daily lives. We'll hear stories of transformation, faith journeys, and the powerful ways God is working in the lives of our fellow believers. In each episode, we'll also discuss practical ways we can live out our faith, serving our community and making a positive impact in the world around us. We hope to inspire and equip you to live a life filled with purpose and devotion. So, whether you're a longtime member of Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle or a new visitor seeking spiritual nourishment, Tabernacle Talks is here to encourage, uplift, and connect us all. Join us as we gather around the digital table, sharing stories, exploring the depths of our faith, and fostering a sense of togetherness that extends beyond the walls of our church. Get ready for engaging conversations, heartfelt moments, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be a part of Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle. Thank you for tuning in to Tabernacle Talks. Let's begin this extraordinary journey together. In today's episode, we're joined with someone that's very special to our church, Brother Rick Owens. Brother Rick, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our podcast here today.
Thank you for having me, Brother Gary.
Brother Rick is no stranger to the longtime members of our church here, but we got some new folks here in the church family, as well as some who are listening who may not be familiar with the history of the Baptist Tabernacle. So, Brother Rick, why don't you take a moment and just tell us a little bit about your connection to our church, and then maybe some of your testimony as well.
Well, I graduated from Bible college in 2002, and so my first job out of Bible college was at Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle. I was hired by Pastor Gary Kate, who was here for 40 years, and so I got to work underneath him in his ministry for 3 years.
Now, I've heard some pretty humorous stories about some of y'all's interactions, especially when it comes to Vacation Bible School.
Yes, and I know y'all just got finished having your Vacation Bible School. We're having ours next week, and so it brought back a lot of memories of doing different skits and things with him, because it was usually just me and him, and I know we had some that were like Tex and Mex, which even 20 years ago were offensive to some people. I can't even imagine doing those today. But I was a court jester in one Vacation Bible School. I had to wear tights, which was quite interesting. But it was a lot of just slapstick, a lot of physical humor, tripping over each other, knocking each other over, stuff like that.
Now, do I remember correctly that there may have even been some broken bones involved with some of these?
I think Brother Kate may have broken some bones. I never broke a bone doing it, but I'm pretty sure he did.
Well, you were the young guy at the time.
I was the young guy.
For those of you who don't know, Brother Rick, after he spent his time here at our church, the Lord called him and his family to be missionaries in the country of Wales. And Brother Rick, how many years did you guys spend in Wales?
We were there for 15 years, and a large part of the missions burden that God had placed on our heart came through the Baptist Tabernacle, because the Baptist Tabernacle is such a missions-minded churches. And I know, especially with Pastor Kate, he was always having missionaries come in and talking about the different missions fields, and that's when God really spoke to my heart about missions.
Now, I didn't ask you this before, but was there perhaps like a specific missionary that you remember that the Lord using to really show you that this is what he had for you?
I do. It was a missionary named Kevin Davis in Wales, and he started as a missionary later in life, so he already had his career, already had his family, and he came to this church and he talked about the excuses that we make for not doing what God wants us to do, and I just felt like he was speaking directly to me, and that was the time when I surrendered to be a missionary.
Amen. So tell us a little about what it was like in Wales. And I know from the last time that you came and visited as a missionary was right in the middle of the pandemic, and you guys were facing a lot of different obstacles. But tell us, it wasn't all obstacles, obviously, those 15 years, but tell us a little bit about missions in Wales.
Missions in Wales, it's a lot different than pastoring in the States. I just felt like because we were in such a spiritually dark country, and I know America is spiritually dark in its own element here, but it was, I don't know, you could cut it with a knife, the spiritual darkness, and it was like it felt like we were on the front lines of the battle, always. And the devil was just attacking your family, attacking your church, and every different area that he could possibly attack in. So it could be very discouraging at times. I know he did attack through our family, especially through our oldest son, different things like that we've gone through there, but and that's not to say that pastoring in America is easy, because it's not. It has its own set of challenges.
Right.
It's just different. And even though we were in an English-speaking country, it's still very much cultural shock there. And so you have to deal with culture shock. You deal with raising your family in a country that you're not used to, and everything like that. So it's very much different. There was a big adjustment going from the States to Wales.
Now, your wife, Miss Jamie, she had a bit of a connection to Wales before y'all went. Isn't that correct?
Yes, she lived in Wales from when she was 9 to 18 years old. And so her parents were missionaries over there for nearly 30 years, and they also were supported by the Baptist Tabernacle. A little known story about my wife and the situation there is when they were on deputation raising support, my wife and her twin sister and then her brother, they were here, and their parents were here, and Brother Kate had taken them out somewhere. Well, in the vehicle on the way back, they got into a fight, and then they got into a fight, and that carried over to the parsonage, which was in the old building over there on Maple Street, and they got into a fight, and they did not realize that Pastor Kate's office was right down from the old parsonage, and or the old missions apartment, and so my father-in-law made the two girls go into Pastor Kate's office and apologize to them. And the funny thing was that Pastor Kate didn't even hear that they were fighting. He had no clue. But then when he interviewed me for the youth pastor position, he remembered my wife and that apology. It really did make a big impact on him.
Wow. No, I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
So it's been how many years now since you guys came back from Wales?
We left Wales in June of 2020. We had no intention of leaving the field permanently. It was just one of those things where God just changed our hearts and changed our direction. Some different things that we've gone through especially with our oldest son, with the battle with drug addiction and being in and out of rehabs and different things like that. God directed our hearts into Snyder, Texas, which I'd never even heard of Snyder, Texas, up until about December of 2021. Or December of 2020, excuse me. I'd never even heard of Snyder, Texas. And so it was a big change going from Wales, which is a country in which it rains year-round, constantly. Everything's green all the time. Going to West Texas where it's dry. And literally most people would not want to go there because it's so dry.
Now, you guys are kind of like right in the middle of Midland and Abilene and Amarillo. They're all kind of right around you. Isn't that correct?
Yes, we're pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Nowhere.
Because you have to go an hour and a half to get to Lubbock, or an hour and a half to get to Abilene, or an hour and a half to get to San Angelo, or an hour and a half to get to Midland. So we're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. I was actually closer to more American restaurants in Wales than I was in Snyder, Texas.
Oh, no. Now, you guys have 4 kids, is that correct?
We have 4 kids.
3 boys and a girl.
Yes, sir.
And how are they adjusting to, coming back to the States?
I think for my now 18-year-old son, he did not want to go back to Wales because he experienced a lot of bullying over there, and just because it's hard to find Christian friends over there. And so we really prayed that when he came back, he would find good Christian friends, which he has done. And so I think it's been a good adjustment to him. Our oldest son has always kind of struggled and just has a hard time maybe even just finding his place in the world. I don't know if it is a hard thing with missionaries and missionary kids is that you never really feel at home. When you're on the mission field, you don't feel like it's at home. But then when you come back to America, you don't feel like it's at home because so much has changed. And when you're out of the country, things keep going. Things move on. It's out of sight, out of mind. And so your friends move on. Your family members, even in a lot of ways, move on. They get adjusted to life without you. So coming back was a bit of adjustment. Our younger kids, Morgan and Micah, Morgan's now 13, although she acts like a 17-year-old. And Micah is 9, but they're adjusting very well. Now, our youngest son, Micah, he is on the autism spectrum, so he has Asperger's, which he always is a bit socially awkward, kind of like his dad. But anyway, he has some social adjustments there with that. But it was kind of good to get him back to America. He was able to get a proper diagnosis and get him some help. So,
yeah, that's an interesting thing for you to bring that up. And of course, I've only met Morgan and Micah, I believe, and just absolutely enjoyed the time that they were here. And wish I could hire Morgan as my full-time babysitter for my kids. But tell us a little bit about, just as a Christian parent, parent in ministry with a child that does have some special considerations. How has that affected your ministry? Has it opened doors for you as you've met with different people?
It has in a little ways opened some doors. I think when you meet with therapists and people who help with that, you get to talk to people and stuff like that. It does make it a little bit more challenging, especially like if we're taking missionaries out. He's very much, I want to get back home. His goal in life is to get back home as fast as he can because that's his comfort zone. So the spending time, talking, fellowshipping after church. So we have to sometimes work around that, but he's adjusting pretty well. I think now that he's in a routine, it helps him to cope a little bit better. So I think he's getting better, and I think he'll be able to function well. We actually had a missionary come to our church a little while back, a few months ago, and he has a 23-year-old son with Asperger's. So, and he's fully functioning, and he's going to college and doing different things. So it just kind of gave us courage to see, or encouraged us to see a fully functioning person with a very similar thing that our son is going through. So
that's great, the way the Lord brings people into our lives.
Absolutely.
To kind of show us what he's able to do. And I'm glad that happened for y'all. What about pastoring? I mean, here you are, in Wales, getting churches started and helping churches stay alive. And now to come to Texas, it doesn't get more American than Texas, I think. But you're there in the middle of Texas with this church, and following you on social media, it seems like you guys have just hit the ground running, trying to get involved in your community. Tell us some of the things that are going on there in Snyder.
One of the things I felt like with the adjustment, part of what we were doing was church revitalization, not so much exactly church planting, because in Wales there are so many churches that are just on the verge of dying. So, for example, we had one church in Wales where when we started helping them, there was like 5 people in the church, and most of them were elderly. And so coming to Snyder, Texas, the church had got down to a very small amount of people. Not 5, thank goodness, but it had got down to quite small. So it has been a church revitalization. So in some ways it's been similar, but at the same time it's been different, just because churches are run differently in America than they are in Wales. There's a different kind of like business side of how things are run. I found that churches in Wales are more like kind of everybody has a say more, whereas here they expected me to be the CEO of the church, and I like to still kind of like to run things a little bit like we did in Wales, where we have everybody kind of have a say. Now, I'll make recommendations, and most times they'll follow the recommendations, but I like to get everybody's input and get everybody involved in the decision making so that everybody more can have a part in it and ownership in the church. Of course, it's the Lord's church, but just to have a part in it and a say in it. There were some issues before we got there, some transparency issues and things like that.
Yeah, and I would think that, people appreciate when their leaders are going to them for their opinion or helping them feel like they're a part of the decision-making process. I know here at the Baptist Tabernacle that we've seen good success with that. I would imagine that your folks back in Snyder appreciate kind of that different approach of, hey, let's be a unified group in this decision. Right. I'm not here to lord over you. Let's work through this together.
And I especially, and you probably found this out as well, anytime you're coming in and you're taking over a church as a pastor, you don't want to come in and just start changing a bunch of stuff right away. You've got to let the people get to know you and gain that trust before you can, especially if they came out of a bad situation in the previous. And so that took time, and we didn't want to just jump right in and start messing with a bunch of stuff. But another thing I will say about the differences is that when we were in Wales, when we had a congregation, at one point we had that congregation of 5 people. One of the youngest people in the church was like 79 years old. So when we're doing like youth ministries and doing vacation Bible schools and different things like that, you pretty much as a missionary, you had to be everything. Your wife had to be everything. But it's been really refreshing just to have people in the church, like for the vacation Bible school that we're doing next week. We've got 20-something adults and teenagers that are volunteering and helping. And I pretty much don't even have to do anything. I mean, I'm doing stuff. Don't tell my people that I'm not doing anything. I'm trying to look busy. But, right, you've got other people doing crafts, other people doing the food, other people doing the songs and the games and stuff like that. It's just been really refreshing in that to have everybody getting together and helping out.
Yeah, coming here to the Baptist Tabernacle, VBS, especially has always been a very passionate ministry for this church. And so you're right. It's really incredible to see, folks and I'm sure it happens in other countries, but I think here in America, we really benefit from people who have experience running these ministries, and they take ownership of certain parts, crafts, snacks, Bible stories, and you can watch and see how the Lord uses them, and you get to experience the feeling of, I don't have to be the focal point in every aspect of this ministry. And I think that's a great blessing that we sometimes maybe just gloss over without really thinking about it.
Absolutely. And to be honest, we can't make church all about us, because if the church becomes so dependent upon us as a pastor, then when we leave, or if we have to leave for some reason, you don't want to see the church fall apart because you're not there anymore.
Yeah. You
want to be able to see things continue on. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be. Oh, shout out to Nancy Collier, who just retired from Vacation Bible School, because when I started here 20 years ago, she was doing Vacation Bible School. And in fact, you may not know this, but the first week on the job here for me at Baptist Tabernacle was Vacation Bible School.
Oh, wow.
I literally got settled in the house, and we jumped right into Vacation Bible School.
That's a great way to get to know people around here, because it's a high percentage of church members that are involved with VBS. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, that Miss Nancy's going to retire from VBS. We'll see if it happens next year. How have you seen the church grow in different ways since you've been there? I know a lot of times growth is happening under the surface. I think for us right now in the summer, a lot of our growth is under the surface, and then sometimes we'll see it, burst up, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, where'd all this come from? How have you seen your church there in Snyder grow in seen or unseen ways?
We've seen our church grow. I think at first, when you're starting out as a new pastor, there's kind of the curiosity factor. So you may have people that had used to come to church, or they haven't come to a while, and they will come back to just see what the new pastor's all about. So you'll have initial growth like that, but then that tends to fade away. And so then you begin to grow in other ways. And we begin to see younger couples come into the church. We've seen people move in, and it's getting harder, even in a church like our size, to find a town our size, to find churches that are still preaching the Bible. I mean, I've had people come and they drive 30 minutes to come to church because they've tried several other churches and they don't even preach the Bible anymore. Mm-hmm. Which in Texas, that kind of stuff still happens. It's surprising, but it happens. And so just to have a church that still has a midweek service like you guys have here, and or Sunday night service and things like that, people are finding it harder and harder to find a good conservative church that still preaches the Bible.
Yeah,
and
right.
So there's always going to be transfer growth. That's going to happen. That's not the ideal growth. You want to see more salvation. We've had a lot of young people that have been saved through the children's ministry. When we first got there was no children's ministry. I think it was the the worship leader that his 2 kids came to church, and that was pretty much it. So we've seen a lot of growth through the children's ministry and the children's parents then coming to church. And so, in fact, recently we just had a baptism of a little girl on Sunday night. She got saved during camp. She did not get saved at camp, but she got saved the week of camp. Her mother led her to the Lord, which was exciting.
Praise the Lord.
And we got to baptize her on Sunday, and it was her birthday. So that was exciting.
That is exciting. I love it when kids at our church get saved and then get baptized. It has an energizing effect on the rest of the church body.
Can I share a story with you about baptism? Because in Wales, it was very different.
Absolutely.
They didn't like to baptize children in Wales because they wanted to see them to make sure that they were, how can I say this, to basically have the kids kind of prove themselves or watch the children for a while before they baptized them, which is not scriptural, by the way. But that was just, I think that was more of a cultural thing. So just to give you some cultural differences between America and Wales.
Do you think it has something to do with the influence of other denominations that are more prevalent in Wales?
Yes, I think it does. And also, I noticed over there that baptism is like a big event. I mean, it's big here too. You invite your friends and family. But if you talk to somebody and you ask them about their faith or their testimony, they will usually tell you when they got baptized. And that's not to say they're not saved. At first I thought, well, maybe they're not saved because they're pinning it on their baptism. But it was just such a special event for them to kind of settle it in. And so let's make sure that you're saved and you're not just trusting on your baptism to get you to heaven. But and usually for most of the times that was the case. But it was just such a big event. So maybe that's why it was. Maybe they didn't want that. I think also they had seen maybe kids come in, get saved, and then they fall away, which you see people do that all the time. But still in the Bible, it talks about repenting and being baptized.
Yeah, there weren't these great lengths of time in between salvation and baptism. It would usually happen pretty quickly.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit, or tell our listeners a little bit about the difference in your ability to be involved in your community. I would imagine there's probably a lot of restrictions as a missionary in Wales as to what you can do or be involved with, whereas I'm sure in Texas you feel a little bit more liberty to kind of be out in your community and be open about what you're doing.
It's kind of interesting because in Wales there were some difficulties, although I found it easier there I could actually get into the schools over there. In fact, I was invited one time to teach a class on baptism at a public school in Wales where my kids attended because their theme for that month was water. And so they got me to come in and give a talk about baptism, and I got to give the gospel through that. But they would also have Muslim people come in and take them to temples, and Buddhists come in and take them to temples and things like that. And so they got all of it. It had to be very inclusive, so it wasn't like they were just getting one side of it. So I had that there. We really don't have our community in Snyder, Texas. There's quite a few churches in it. It's a very close-knit community. There are a lot of opportunities. Some of the ways that I've tried to get involved in the community just to get to know people, because just being there for a couple of years, you don't know a lot of people. So we've done things like I've began coaching my son's basketball team, which has helped get to know people in the community. And I wanted to really use that as a way to invite people to church and get to know people in the community. And so that was one of the ways that I did that. But they don't have basketball in Wales, and I didn't know cricket or rugby, so.
Yeah, I coached my son's soccer team for the first time last fall, and it was a great opportunity. Met a lot of families and made connections with people that live just right next door to the church, and I think that's a great way to get to know folks in the community and to be present, What else about making that transition from pastoring in Wales to pastoring here in America? Do you sense a different response from the people when you preach? I mean, how is the reception in Wales as opposed to here in the States?
There's a huge difference in the reception when you preach because the Welsh people are very quiet. They're very reserved. So you don't get all the amens here and things like that you would get in Texas. In Wales, you wonder, are they even listening? They usually are listening, but they're just going to be very quiet about it and more introspective, whereas we in Texas especially, and I'm not sure how it is here in Oklahoma, but we like to give our loud amens and shouts, and that's right, and all of that. So it's a little bit different. You kind of get the more instant feedback. But I think as far as a response to the gospel, I just think because it's in Texas, it's the Bible Belt, and then also Wales with its Christian kind of history that it had as well. And I know it's come a long way from that. But I think everybody pretty much in generally just thinks that they're good people. And so you still see that. We had a guy last night, he was talking about going to a rodeo this past week and sharing the gospel. He's a gospel singer, Southern gospel singer. And anyway, he was talking about how the thing with the hard thing about reaching cowboys is they all think they're just good people. And they generally are good people. So we had the same issue in Wales, is everybody thinks they're good people. And you have to get people to realize that they're lost before they can get saved and accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. Because we're all sinners, but sometimes we get this mentality where, well, as long as the good that I do outweighs the bad, then I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how prevalent that is, as we see it here in our community as well. Everyone is, quote-unquote, Christian,
right?
Regardless of whether they've actually done something with Jesus or not.
I remember one time that I went on visitation here in Collinsville with Pastor Kate, and I met a lady in I think she was in one of the apartment complexes somewhere in this area, and she swore up and down that she had never sinned in her entire life.
Oh, no.
Which was a lie, so that there was a sin in itself. But I could not, no matter how hard I tried, I could not convince this woman that she was a sinner. And she just got angrier and angrier with me the more I tried to share verses with her about it. But yeah, I'll never forget that lady.
Well, we have a lot of different listeners that may be part of the church, may not be part of the church. We got some folks I know here in the church, some of our young people that could potentially be considering being a missionary or being in the ministry. And now that you've been involved in domestic ministry, foreign ministry, what are some words of advice that you would give to someone that's considering giving their life to be a youth pastor or a missionary or a pastor? You've been able to experience all these things. What would you say to that young person or that adult that's considering those things?
Obviously, you want to bathe any kind of major decision like that in prayer, because you don't want to do it, and then also you don't want to go out and do it and try to do it in your own strength. Because a lot of times in any kind of ministry, we have a tendency to do things in our own power instead of relying upon the Holy Spirit to help us. And so definitely bathe it in prayer. Talk to other people that you can get advice and wisdom from. Also, like what we did was we went out as a team ministry to begin with. And so if you do consider going to be a foreign missionary, before you go through 2 years or 3 years now of raising support, go to the mission field for a year or 2 years and get that experience. And it'll make it so much easier when you come back and do have to raise support. But just make sure that you have a true calling for it and get God's leadership in it. Like I said, we did a 1 year team ministry while we were over there before we raised support. And it just worked. It really confirmed in our hearts that was where God wanted us to be. So,
well, we're so excited to be able to have you back here at the Baptist Tabernacle, and I'm not sure when this episode will broadcast, but
hopefully never.
I don't think that's going to happen. But it's always a joy to have you and your wife here, and I know your kids aren't with us this time, but I know your family is very special to our church. And I'm so glad that we could introduce you here on the podcast to our listeners. And we're looking forward to having a good time with you guys here this week. So thank you so much for joining us and for coming to be a part of our services here at the Baptist Tabernacle.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Yes, sir. And that concludes another enriching episode of Tabernacle Talks. We hope you found inspiration and encouragement through our conversation today. Before we go, we want to extend our gratitude to our wonderful guest, who generously shared their story and insight. Your voice has truly enriched our community. We also want to express our deepest appreciation to the members of the Collinsville Baptist Tabernacle. Your continued support and engagement make this podcast possible. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Stay connected with us throughout the week. Connect with us on social media. Join us in our Facebook groups and let us continue to grow together in our faith. If you enjoyed today's episode, we invite you to subscribe to Tabernacle Talks on your favorite podcast platform, so you never miss an opportunity to delve deeper into our shared journey. As we part ways for now, remember that you are an integral part of our church family. Let your light shine brightly in your community, spreading love, compassion, and the message of the gospel.